Discipline me for being 22 seconds late without notice? Got it. Won't happen again. This happened several years ago because it was some malicious compliance that lasted for years. My former employer uses a points-based system to track attendance. The parts of the policy relevant to this story are: tardy with call-in prior to the start of shift, 1/2 point; tardy with no call, 1 point; accumulate enough points and you're fired. There's a set of train tracks crossing the street that leads to this facility. Occasionally, trains will stop while blocking this crossing. If you're caught there in the last few minutes before you're supposed to clock in, you have a decision to make: wait or go around. Either way, you might be late. Sometimes you'll decide to go around and then the train clears the crossing and the folks who waited get in before you. Sometimes you'll wait and watch through the gaps in the train cars as folks who went around pull into the parking lot while you're still idling at a blocked train crossing. To be clear, going around involves taking a lot of secondary county roads as well as a few field access roads. It's an extremely rural area, so you literally never know what kind of road conditions you're going to find along the way around. The roads may even be entirely unusable during the winter months where snow covers them. One night, during my years on third shift, I was stopped at these tracks and decided to wait. Eventually the train moved on. I raced into the parking lot, used my keycard to zip through the turnstiles, and ran to the punch clock. My clock-in time was 10:30 p.m. They have these biometric punch clocks that read your fingerprint to clock employees in and out. Sometimes these clocks just will not read your fingerprint. I got to the punch clock and it said 10:30. I'm golden. It doesn't track seconds. I entered my employee ID number and placed my finger on the sensor. 3 beeps, failed red. Tried again. 3 beeps. Tried once more. 3 beeps. Nope, not trying again because by this time the clock was likely to tick over to 10:31 in the middle of reading my finger. When I got to my assigned work area, I told my team manager what happened. He said don't worry about it, he'd manually punch me in. I should have listened. But I'm a worrier. In the morning, when the front office people started showing back up, I went to the attendance office to confirm that my situation was all good. The office administrator decided to check my gate time, and used that as the determining factor. I scanned my keycard at 10:30 and 22 seconds p.m. That's a tardy, no call. 1 full attendance point to be issued. I reiterated that it was a train stopped on the tracks, completely beyond my control. She advised me to either leave earlier, and just wait an extra half an hour for my shift to start on the majority of days, or else get a cell phone, I didn't have one at all back then, to call in with from the road next time. Well, what I did instead was start calling in absent just in case something comes up after I leave home but before I arrive at work in the evenings before leaving for work. The first few days the attendance office up front was just bemused. After weeks, they became annoyed. After months, they'd apparently complained enough and I finally got told to stop. During the course of this conversation, they revealed that calling in too early before the start of your shift made it extra challenging to make sure the notice gets to the right members of management, because the message is no longer flagged as new by the time they're creating logs for the next shift. This was great news for me. From then on, every morning before leaving the premises at the end of my shift, I used one of their phones to call in absent for my next shift that evening. They tried to write me up for insubordination but the labor union slapped it down, pointing out that the collective bargaining agreement specifies the time we must call in by, but does not specify a time before which call-ins may not be made. Cue the huge grin across my face. I never forgot that my team manager tried to do me a solid though. If I was actually going to be late or absent for some reason, I would call that TM's desk line directly to let them know. Even long after I finally got a cell phone, I continued doing this. I'd just call in on my way home, instead of sticking around to use their phones after my shift. Found out years and years later from some union reps that upper management never got over this. Drove them nuts that they got beat at their own game by something so simple. It didn't bring the walls crumbling down, but it was a persistent, enduring source of frustration and impotence for them. And really, knowing you can manage all of that with just a 22-second phone call a day, that's the kind of thing that gets you out of bed in the evening. TLDR, I got full discipline for being 22 seconds late without calling in to give notice due to a stopped train blocking access to the workplace. So, for the next 11 years, I called in absent from work every single day just in case, then still showed up on time every time, creating a little bit of extra work for the person who decided to discipline me in the first place. Edit. Probably the number one observation I'm seeing is that I should have just sucked it up and left for work earlier. I've commented this a couple times already, but so nobody has to dig for it. I usually left so early that I got to work before the 20 minutes prior to the start of our shifts that we were allowed to clock in. This stopped train event was a rare and unpredictable exception, but the crossing was regularly blocked for a few to several minutes by a moving train, not to mention all the other random stuff that could come up on your way to work.
Now to the comments. What kind of workplace issues discipline for someone clocking in 22 seconds late?
A line manager at a factory I worked at tried to write me up for not arriving 10 minutes before my shift before. Definitely would have happily written me up if I was 10 seconds late to my shift too. I was given the excuse of that way we know you're here and ready to go as soon as it ticks over 1,400 or something along those lines. Suffice to say, I did not turn up 10 minutes early, ever, and never actually got written up. Despite this conversation happening multiple times over the span of a few months, usually concluding quite abruptly when I asked if I was going to be paid for those 10 minutes, or alternatively allowed out 10 minutes earlier to ensure I was outside the factory at 2,200 and therefore free from my workplace obligations the moment my shift ends. Edit, went to bed and woke up to just what? This was meant to just be a throwaway anecdote lol. A quick browse of the responses though, and I feel I should point out I'm from the UK, Scotland specifically, so any legal advice obviously needs to go through that filter. Also, this was while I was in my early mid-20s, I'm 30 going on 31 now, and I had no clue about the legality of these requests. I only knew I was a stubborn git, still am, who was already sick of managerial BS. In fact, I have a couple of malicious compliance stories of my own from this same factory. Besides that, appreciate the replies, award and upvotes, and I will slowly make my way through them all as the day goes on hopefully.
I did this for 2 weeks before they eased up on the time clock thing. Wanted me to punch in exactly at 9 a.m. So I punched out exactly at 5 p.m. Boss tells me that the shop door won't come down on a Friday afternoon at 4:56 p.m. Brother, that door ain't getting fixed till Monday at exactly 9 a.m. Hope for your sake my tools are still here after the weekend, cause the 25 cents you save by me clocking in exactly at 9 a.m. ain't gonna pay for them. You wanna nickel and dime my time? Fine by me. You get exactly 8 hours. Period. Not only was it malicious, it was continuously malicious, which elevates it into the glorious category. That was a very satisfying read, thank you for that.
Glorious. Not delicious malicious?
Gloriously delicious. I had a manager like this. I was outside shooting the shit before my shift. I think I still had like 5 minutes, and my manager sticks his head out the door, looks at me and points at his watch. I knew I was not late because I synced my watch to the time clock, so I go about my day and my shift is over. So I put my stuff down and walk over to the time clock. Manager says, "Aren't you gonna clean up?" I just pointed at my watch and left. I didn't last long there.
I love this so much.
Being maliciously compliant one time because the office dweebs are being petty that day. Fun. Being maliciously compliant for years after even when they beg you to stop but aren't able to punish you for it? Priceless.
What's more annoying is when it's a train next to work like that. More than one person will be coming in at the same time and it is quite easy to know if it's a train or not. The fact that management would deal with this for years instead of alter their policy to allow the train tardiness, or why the union didn't force them to, is ridiculous. OP should have gotten others to do it as well.
Never heard of train tardiness, but it seems like it makes sense. You'd obviously see a wave of employees coming in when a train lets in, so it's a bit obvious. I worked at a place that was a decent-sized call center in a small town, 30K, just east of nowhere. It was pretty much a running gag that when the kids graduated from the local high school, they were given their diploma and their start date. Money wasn't great, but the work was pretty simple. Management decided, in their very finite wisdom, to implement a plan where it was something like 3 occurrences and you get written up, rolling, I think, and 3 write-ups and you're fired. Okay, fine. Problem was that they decided to treat someone arriving 15 minutes late, with the same weight as a no-call no-show. Management was surprised to discover that punctuality improved, but for some strange reason the NCNS rate skyrocketed. Guess if you hire a bunch of new grads with minimal skills, and only pay them a bit over what they'd make flippin' burgers, they're not likely to give a duck about your threats?
They likely learned this behavior from similar attendance at high school. When you punish late with the same weight as not here, well, why bother showing up then?
Skipped my chem class in high school so often because if I was late, I got half an hour of detention, but if I didn't show it, was a full hour. However, it was over lunch period too, so skipping bought me about 2 full hours of my time. If I was going to be late, I always just skipped instead and read a book in detention later. Later in the year I found out the teacher didn't always turn in the tardy slip to the office. I went to check how much detention I had left and found out I had negative detention hours. So, I skipped chem that day too.